Thank you for listening to this podcast from TRE, Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain and around the world. For more information, please visit tre.radio.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
Good evening and welcome. It's nice to have your company on this, the 27th of November. We're almost there, lads. We're almost at the end of it. I've been wishing it, haven't I, for a very long time indeed. Anyway, do hope I find you well. Thank you very much to Howard Brereton for Spain today. Howard is back with us tomorrow between 6 and 7 for another edition of it. Looking forward to that. And Howard, you and Luna have yourselves a very pleasant evening in Eire. And thanks again for looking after us for the last 60 minutes or thereabouts. Now, what have I got for you this evening on the programme? Well, Patricia, I did tell you that weeks ago we're going to have Patricia every day up to Christmas because she has a brand new series that I want to get done and make sure that I get all episodes in, and I will be able to. She's going to be telling us another story about an Irish person who was the first to do something, or the first Irish person to do something. All right, so that's coming up in this hour. And in the second hour of the programme, as promised over the last week or two, George Lee will be joining me and we'll be having a chat about the election. I was hoping that Ben Sweeney would join me as well, but not a hope, and we'll explain why maybe next week, because I'm hoping that George and Ben will both join me to look back at the general election, and that's what George and I will be looking at. There are a couple of other stories and a couple of things that we want to cover as well. We have already done the G2. We did it this morning, and it's a long one. All right, so it is the second part of the programme, but there's bits and pieces of different things in there that I hope you will enjoy as well. So sit back, relax, and just don't even answer the door now, or don't answer the phone. It's as simple as that. I don't know about the weather in Spain, because I haven't been paying much attention to it. But here in Ireland, on the west coast particularly, there is a lot of fog. It never lifted all day, a freezing fog. It is absolutely perishing. And I didn't venture outside the door. I was able to stay at home, and I had the fire lighting from 1:30 today. It was absolutely brilliant. So the whole house is grand and toasty and warm. You'll hear the sparks now. If you pay attention very soon, I will pity anyone that was out to get a haircut today. Aye, to be very cold. Don't know why I put that into my head, but there you go. Speaking of the general election, we go to the polls on Friday, and I'll be looking forward to this day week being able to give you some idea as to how it finished up. And as you know, our PR system means that sometimes counts can drag on for a little while because they all have to be done by hand. So each individual vote has to be handled and counted. So there you go. Well, it's in the middle of one of the most hotly contested three-seaters in the country, but passing through Abbey Leaks in County Laois, one could be forgiven for not noticing an election is on. Why is that? The lampposts are bare. There are no candidate posters. The move was taken by the local Tidy Towns Committee 6 years ago. Mary White is the secretary of the Abbey Leaks Tidy Towns, and she said that in 2018 they implemented a no poster policy because they were a blight on the horizon. She said that they didn't know what to do about introducing a no poster policy, so they spoke to the local councillors and TDs and asked if they would have an issue if posters were not allowed in the town, and apparently every one of them supported her. Hey, that's brilliant. Miss White is keen not to characterise it as a ban on election posters, but she said politicians have been adhering to requests not to put them up. She also said that others, like circuses and other businesses, have been asked not to put their posters up and have been given notice board space on the edge of town to advertise their wares. But does being poster free disadvantage newer candidates who are eager to get their face out there? Well, Miss White says that if you're a new candidate, you need to introduce yourself to the people. So a little bit of shoe leather walking door to door that's going to have more of an impact than a poster. Ms. White said that there has been only a few complaints. I suppose social media is going to do a lot of that now as well, isn't it? Because there has been a huge amount of money spent. We'll probably talk about that. I think of a story. In fact, I do, coming up just after this. Other areas of the country have also opted for a poster-free campaign, including other parts of County Laois. Gort in County Galway is another example, and along the seafront in Dublin Bay North. However, election posters are a staple of campaigns and have been around as long as elections themselves. Indeed, they have. And something, it gives the media something to write about and talk about as well, because there will be a poster watch after the election, because I think they have something like 10 days or 2 weeks to get all of the posters down. And then you'll have people ringing various talk shows and saying they never took away the little wire ties that they used to put them on the poles and things like that. So there'll be a lot of more work like that. So as I said, it's good for the media at times. But anyway, there we go. Now, according to data published on Monday, parties and candidates have spent more than €330,000 on ads on social media platforms so far during the general election campaign. The vast majority of this was spent with Meta, which operates Facebook and Instagram, with the rest being spent on Google sites like YouTube. During recent previous campaigns, Sinn Féin has tracked close to the highest spending Irish party on digital advertising. However, so far in election 2024, it's been heavily outspent, not just by Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, but also Labour. Interesting. The Social Democrats have even slightly outspent Sinn Féin, I'm told. Sinn Féin has spent €23,343 on Facebook and Instagram advertising, compared to Fine Gael's €85,576 and Fianna Fáil's just over 72,000. The available Meta data covers spending until Friday last. Sinn Féin has spent nothing on Google, compared with 17,000 and 5,000 from Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, respectively. Now, during the local and European election in June, Sinn Féin outspent all other parties for weeks until the final days of the campaign, when it was surpassed by a surge of spending by Fine Gael. It's understood that Sinn Féin is holding its spending resources for a major ramp-up in digital advertising in the final days of the election. Sinn Féin has been spending around €1,200 a day on Meta ads. On Wednesday last, this increased to 1,600, then 1,900 on Thursday, followed by 4,000 on Friday, the most recent day for which there is data available. Now, over recent elections, parties and candidates have been focusing increasingly on reaching voters on social media platforms and have made their ads on certain platforms a prominent figure of their campaign. Large platforms are required to publish political ad spending data under the European Digital Services Act. Meta and Google both maintain transparency data libraries, from which detailed information is typically available. X is also subject to the Digital Services Act. However, researchers point to difficulties accessing data on ads published by the company. No surprise there. Other platforms like TikTok say that they do not allow political ads. On TikTok, the prominence on the content published by the parties is organic. In other words, not boosted by advertising cash. I see. Will I do this? I will, yes, because a project bringing passenger trains back to Navan in County Meath before 2035 is set to begin. It will deliver a new rail line stretching approximately 20 kilometres from the existing terminal station at M3 Parkway north of Dunboyne to Navan. This will make a direct Navan to Dublin City train feasible as the busy commuter town continues to grow. Iarnród Éireann's line is expected to serve new stations including Dunshaughlin and Kilmessan along its route. Subject to planning and funding approvals, the project delivery phase is envisaged between 2030 and 2035 under the NTA's Greater Dublin Area Transport Strategy. The first phase of this programme will see scope and design development and route option selection developed over the next 2 years. It will include public consultation on the emerging preferred route proposal and will prepare for a railway railway order, which is the equivalent of planning permission. This railway application, or this railway order application, will be going to on board Planola in 2027. Funding for the project is provided by the Department of Transport through the National Transport Authority, that is the NTA. In a statement, Eire Road Éireann said people living in catchment areas including Navan, Kilmessan and Dunshaughlin will benefit from faster, more sustainable travel options. The low-carbon Dublin to Navan train will also prevent further traffic on roads and support population growth and economic development in the corridor, it said. Eire Road Éireann suggested the enabling transport-orientated urban compact growth along the corridor will unlock generation opportunities, or regeneration opportunities, and more effective use of land in the eastern region. The chief executive of Eire Road Éireann is Jim Mead, and he said that making rail the backbone of Ireland's sustainable transport network means connecting new communities to its rail network, as well as enhancing existing services. So there we go. The people of Navan must be delighted and excited that they're going to be getting a new train system. Long overdue as well. It's going to take about 11 years though, lads. So catch yourselves on there. Aye. Here's Moncrief. The sun is shining somewhere, I hope.
Nice to meet you, I've no name, but here's a day in my life. Don't know where to start, but here I go. I guess first things first, I play the confident card well, but still I'm the most insecure person I know. And I want love so bad I can taste it, seek validation, and strangers complain that dating's so complicated. I'm trying to write one classic story, but there's no guts and no glory. I'm scared to live my life for me. And nobody can judge me, nobody but me. Hey, the sun is shining somewhere, I just gotta get there. Friends, my life, but I feel like there's something missing, like someone else has rigged the game. Made my religion every Friday night in bed we live in, the bad decisions that I made. And I start a new life each Monday morning, then I hear lows with no warning, like there's always somewhere more important. Trying to write one classic story, but there's no guts and no glory. I'm scared to live my life for me. And nobody can judge me, nobody but me. Hey, the sun is shining somewhere, I just gotta get there.
Nice. The sun is shining somewhere. That comes from Moncrief. Moncrief is from Waterford, if I recall correctly. Nice song, that. I like the stuff he does. Some of it is a bit whingy for me, but I like the majority of it. I forgot to tell you, if you want to give out about something, you can send a text message to our WhatsApp machine at +34 645 99 67 95, or if you want to praise somebody or something or say something nice, you can use the same number, or you can send an email to studio@tre.radio anytime you like. All right. Fishing representative organisations say that you're cutting. Say that the industry is in crisis and are calling on political parties to appoint a designated marine minister in the next government. Chairperson of the Killybegs Fishermen's Organisation, Kieran Doherty, said that his crew will be lucky to have 2 months fishing next year, as Ireland is set to receive its lowest historical share of Europe's mackerel quota since the formation of the EU. Irish Fish Producers and Exporters Organisation CEO Ed O'Donnell said next year mackerel fishermen are facing a 22% quota decrease, resulting in an €18 million loss in the value of landings at Killybegs Harbour, which is home to the national pelagic fleet. Mr. O'Donnell said the industry's key electoral call is for a dedicated minister for the marine, stating that the current portfolio is way too broad. 6 of the main fishing representative organisations have joined forces to call on election candidates and parties to implement 8 actions to save the fishing industry if elected. The sectoral demands include the appointment of a designated minister for the marine, a regeneration of the common fisheries policy, and safeguarding of fishing stocks. Now, the EU has fisheries agreements with Nordic nations, including bilateral, trilateral and neighbouring agreements covering the North Sea and the Atlantic. Fishing representative organisations are concerned that Nordic nations have been setting excessive national unilateral quotas and have used this as leverage in EU negotiations. The European Commission calculates annual total allowable catches or quotas for fish based on scientific advice from the International Council for the Exploration of the Sea, or ICES, ICES. Now, ICES, which is headquartered in Copenhagen, is a leading multidisciplinary scientific forum on all aspects of marine sciences in the North Atlantic. Last autumn, ICES advised the European Commission that unilateral quotas for mackerel resulted in catches exceeding scientific advice by a 40% average since 2010. ICES advised the Commission to reduce the total allowable mackerel catch by 22% next year, mainly due to the decline in and downward revision of the stock size. Following the ICES advice, the EU's Pelagic Advisory Council warned the European Commission that if urgent action was not taken, the exploitation of the mackerel stock will have long-term detrimental impacts on the EU fishing industry. Mr. Doherty believes that Nordic nations are getting the lion's share of quota, and Ireland, through the EU, has been getting a declining share year on year, while other nations expand their fishery. He says that Nordic nations are building more boats and more processing capacity, while they're being forced to tie at the walls in Killybegs. I see. For at least 9 months of the year, he said. Aye. Okay. That's a hot potato, if ever there was a hot potato, and one that I would imagine the incoming government is going to have to deal with very, very quickly. A group of 5 councillors in Athlone in County Westmeath have said that they are seeking a judicial review of the government order which would see the development of a new centre for international protection applicants in the town. Now, the councillors, Paul Hogan, Frankie Keena, John Dolan, Kevin Boxer-Moran and Angus O'Rourke. Kevin Boxer-Moran is he's a candidate actually in the general election for Dáil Éireann. Angus O'Rourke would be a son of the late Mary O'Rourke, who passed away earlier this year. Anyway, they also confirmed that they were seeking an injunction to halt work While that review was heard, the councillors have instructed their legal team to begin proceedings and said that their review will be based on environmental grounds. The development of Lissie Woolham is scheduled to accommodate 100 international protection applicants at first, with this number then rising over time to 1,000. Since the ministerial order was made in October, councillors have been outspoken in their opposition, have described the move as reckless and unacceptable, and said that they were left completely in the dark about the plan. Protests have been ongoing outside the site, where there is already a direct provision centre. Alrighty, time for more music, I think. We're going to do this one, will we? We will. We'll give this an old plug. Why not? It's from Soda Blonde. I haven't played Soda Blonde in a while, but let's play it. Here's a song that's called Bully. Brand new, it comes from Soda Blonde. It's called Bully. It is Talk Radio Europe, your voice in Spain, and it is live on Eire with me, Ger Sweeney, taking you through until 9 this evening. I hope that you can stay with me, and I hope I find you well. Right, I'm going to do a very quick break, and just after that I will be back to you and I will introduce Patricia, and she's got another old yarn for us.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
You're welcome back to the programme, and thank you for tuning our way on this Wednesday evening. If you don't know by now, I would like a note, please, as to where you have been up to now. But Patricia joins us. She's been joining us every week for the last 3 weeks, and she will be for the next 4 as well, today included. And the reason being is she tells us stories. Yeah, and she links them all together, and she does series, and they're absolutely fantastic. And it's always brilliant to hear the stories. I have learned learned so much about various things by just listening to the stories from Patricia. So thanks to Patricia for the effort she puts in on a constant basis to keep the stories flowing. Well, today she has another story, and she's in the middle of a series which is telling us all about the first Irish people to do certain things, or the Irish people that were first to do something. So let's find out what she has for us today. Patricia.
Well, hello, Ger. Today I'm going to talk about the first Irish person to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. William Butler Yeats won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1923, and he was the first person to do so. He was born in Dublin on the 13th of June, 1865, son of John Butler Yeats and Susan Pollexfen. John Butler Yeats was both a lawyer and an artist. Susan Pollexfen, William's mother, was from Sligo in the west of Ireland, and there's no doubt that she and her family in Sligo played an important role in the young Yeats's life. William spent many summers in the house of his grandparents and later in the house of his Uncle George. As a child, he was mesmerised by the magical beauty of the area. He loved to go for walks in the forest and then sit down close to the shore of the lake, where he would spend hours just listening to the rhythmical, soothing sound of the water splashing against the rocks. For him, it was captivating. Life in Sligo was peaceful, and in the evenings, William enjoyed listening to the stories of Mary Brattle, his uncle's maid. Mary Brattle told him stories about fairies and leprechauns. Mary claimed to be a vidente who had special powers. She certainly had a vivid imagination and enthralled Yeats with tales of Cuchulainn and the Fianna and the spirit world. For a young boy of his age, it was magical. There's no doubt Mary Brattle and her ancient tales influenced the young William Yeats. His first poems to be published were Songs of the Fairies and Voices, as well as an essay entitled The Poetry of Sir Samuel Ferguson. They were published in March 1885 in the Dublin University Review. Yeats always had a great interest in mysticism, spiritualism, occultism, and astrology. In his own words, he said, "The mystical life is the centre of all that I do and all that I think and all that I write." But the person who became his muse, his inspiration, and the great love of his life was Maud Gonne. Yeats first met her when she came to Yeats's house to hand in a letter from John O'Leary to William's father. For William, it was love at first sight. Maud Gonne was passionately devoted to the cause of freedom for Ireland, even though she herself was born in England. She was actually born the same year as Yeats, in 1865. Her father was a colonel in the British Army, and her mother was of the English nobility. Her mother died when Maud was only 6 years of age. Maud stayed with her father, and when he was commissioned to Dublin Castle, she accompanied him. She was 17 at the time, and she helped her father, acting as a hostess when he had invited guests. Maud's father died in 1886, and Maud and her sister then went to England to stay with an uncle. However, Maud fell ill and was recommended to go to France for health reasons. Yeats was completely bowled over by Maud, although the attraction was not mutual. Even though she shared Yeats' fascination with the supernatural, his wishes and dreams, she found him too idealistic and too much of a dreamer. She was more interested in a man of action. The fact is, Yeats was captivated by her and actually dedicated 40 poems to her over the years. She had a special charism which attracted multitudes who came to hear her speak at the meetings. She was totally dedicated to her mission of freedom for Ireland. Yeats tried to become the man of action that she admired, and so accompanied her on many of her journeys. She was young and impulsive, and the crowds flocked to hear her speak at rallies. People were hypnotized by her and thought she had supernatural powers. For Yeats, Maud Gonne was the symbol of human perfection. He saw her in the same way that Dante had seen Beatrix in the 13th century when he dedicated his poems to her, although he hardly knew her. But for him, she symbolised beauty and spiritual perfection. Yeats proposed to Maud many times over the years, but she always rejected him, saying that people like them were destined for more important things in life. Yeats didn't see it like that. In 1894, Yeats met a beautiful young woman called Olivia Shakespeare. She fell in love with Yeats, although she was married. They ran off together, but their relationship only lasted a year, as Olivia realised that Yeats was still very much in love with Maud Gonne. In 1896, Yeats met Lady Gregory, another great lady who played an important role in his life. She was 55 at the time and was of the nobility, something which Yeats appreciated. However, she was also very close to the people of the land and valued their stories of folklore and of the mythical heroes of Ireland such as Cuchulainn, the fairies and the banshees. She collected these stories which were preserved for future generations. Yeats shared her enthusiasm and was impressed by her work. He saw oral tradition as very important, and for him it was the continuity of voice from generation to generation which had to be preserved. Lady Gregory was very intelligent and had a great influence on Yeats. She became his patroness, his friend, his confidant and adviser. She understood his tortuous ups and downs of his moods. Yeats admired her tremendously, and for 30 years he spent all his summers and many of his winters in Lady Gregory's grand mansion and in the gardens of Coole Park. The house was surrounded by forests, magical lakes and rushing flows of water. In 1899, Yeats and George Moore, Edwin Martin and Lady Gregory founded the now world-famous Abbey Theatre in Dublin. Yeats wrote a play for the theatre which was inspired by Maud Gonne. It was called The Countess Kathleen. It was about a lady of the nobility who sells her soul to the devil to save her people from starvation. But all ends well when she herself is saved at the moment of death. It came as something of a devastating blow to Yeats in 1903 when he received the news that Maud Gonne had married an Irish nationalist called Major John MacBride, and that she had converted to Catholicism. Yeats was devastated and fell into deep depression. Hadn't Maud told him that she and he were called to go for more important missions in life and that they hadn't time for mundane things like marriage? The news of Maud Gonne's marriage affected Yeats's poetry. There was a change in the style of his poetry. It was more precise, more conversational, and less adorned. He decided to concentrate on plays for the theatre. Maud Gonne's marriage lasted only 2 years, and in 1905, when Yeats heard that they had broken up, he was overjoyed and offered to do all the paperwork required for the separation. He had hopes that Maud would now accept him in marriage. But once again, she refused him. She was completely committed to the cause of liberation of Ireland, and she had then a son called Sean MacBride. Seeing himself as a 50-year-old bachelor without children, Yeats felt sad and frustrated. He decided to remedy his situation and proposed to Ishalt Gonne, the adopted daughter of Maud Gonne, who was 30 years younger than Yeats. But she too refused him. But strangely enough, it was his old love, Olivia Shakespeare and Ezra Pound, who introduced him to a young, intelligent girl called Georgie Hyde-Leese, whom he finally married in 1917. However, Yeats soon fell into depression once again. Knowing that Yeats had always been interested in the occult, His wife, Georgie, got him interested in automatic writing as a way of bringing him out of his depression. It worked, and he wrote his famous poem, A Vision. It must have been very difficult for Georgie in those early days of her marriage, but she eventually managed to give Yeats peace and tranquility and happiness, which can be appreciated in the poem Towards the Break of Day. Their first child, Anne, was born in 1919, and in 1921 a son was born and was given the name of Michael. In the year of independence of Ireland and the following year, Yeats was made a senator. In 1923, Yeats was the first Irish writer to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. In 1931, he was awarded an honorary doctorate of literature by the University of Oxford. In 1932, his lifelong friend, Lady Gregory, died. And in 1938, Maud Gonne, who had been in and out of prison over the years, visited Yeats soon before he died. They were both in their 70s at the time. Although the ravages of time must have taken their toll on Maud by then, for Yeats, she was still beautiful. He had devoted 40 poems to her over the years. As she was leaving, Yeats reminded her of their past times together and said, "Maud, we should have continued with our Castle of the Heroes. We could still do it." Maud was so surprised that he still remembered it, she couldn't reply. Yeats prepared for his death in the poem Under Ben Bulben. The poem is Under Ben Bulben's head in Drumcliff churchyard, Yeats is laid. An ancestor was rector there long years ago. A church stands near, by the road an ancient cross, no marble, no conventional phrase, on limestone quarried near the spot. By his command, these words are cut. Cast a cold eye on life, on death. Horseman, pass by. Yeats died on the 28th of January 1939 in Cape Martin in France. He was 72. He was temporarily buried near Roquebrune in France, but then, in 1948, following the instructions that he had left, his remains were removed to Drumcliff, County Sligo, where a gravestone marks his grave with the words, "Cast a cold eye on life, on death. Horseman, pass by."
Lean against the wall, strutting Jordans down the halls, hanging around in school. Blonde hair, freckled nose, of Cupid struck a pose. He offered me a seat. He's got attitude, but he's sweet. Dancing in the kitchen and singing to a cheering. I la 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 love him, my blue-eyed boy. Love notes in his darker and
actress, and she got a great voice. She's 13 years old. Her debut single, That Is It, was released back in August of this year, late August, and I played it for you in early September. Niamh Beatrix is her name. She's from County Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland. That's what they call Wicklow, the Garden of Ireland. Thank you very much to Patricia for her story on W.B. Yeats, the first Irishman to win a Nobel Prize. Fabulous. Dingin' for literature. Sorry, for literature. So yeah, great stuff. And we'll have another story from Patricia next week on the programme. Looking forward to it already. Now, Irish consumers plan to spend €329 each over the period of the upcoming Black Friday and Cyber Monday weekend. That is higher than the planned spending by all other European countries that were surveyed by PwC in its Black Friday research. A fifth of consumers in Ireland said that they would spend at least €500 or more. Nearly two-thirds of consumers said that they would likely go bargain hunting over the period and purchase at least one item. Over a third said that they would spend more than they did last year with higher prices and the hope of getting good deals, both factors in that. Nearly half plan to spend the same and 18% will splash less cash, the survey of 2,000 Irish consumers found. Among the reasons that some will spend less is caution about spending, reducing the number of things that they own and believing that they will not get a genuine deal. 77% of consumers said that it is important that they can shop both online and in bricks and mortar stores during the Black Friday and Cyber Monday period. Over half said that they will have the items delivered to their homes, but in-store shopping remains important, attracting 37% of spend. While consumers are more likely to purchase online over the Black Friday weekend, the importance of an omni-channel approach remains, with a significant number of consumers still preferring in-store shopping, said Owen McFeely, the director of PwC Ireland Retail and Consumer Practice. I'm one of these people, I'm a nightmare when people say, what would you like for Christmas? What would you like for your birthday? I say, nothing, I'm fine, thanks, I have everything I need. So I'm a nightmare. Bottle of whiskey usually appears. That's, which is great. That's ideal. I think if I was to ask for the bottle of whiskey, then people might think I had a PROBLEM. But anyway, but the one thing that I do ask, I'd say to them, if you are going to buy me something, would you mind actually buying it in a store, in a shop, in town, locally? Because I really do believe, and all of the gifts that I buy, I try and buy online. I try and buy in store. I do have to buy one or two online occasionally because of what they are. But I do try, if I can, and shop in stores, in shops locally. Anyway, these in-store shoppers create a real opportunity for retailers to deliver excellent in-store service, build trust and deepen their relationships with their shoppers, he added. Who did? Mr. McFeely did. Irish consumers tend to take targeted approach when shopping over Black Friday. Over half said last year that they had a product or a list of products which they were intending to or interested in buying, while over a third said that they buy on impulse. The most popular category bought on Good Friday is electrical devices, with 41% of consumers targeting their spending at these, followed by clothes, shoes and accessories, and health and beauty. Sustainability is also becoming more important around Black Friday and Cyber Monday, with 38% of consumers saying that they will only buy products that they need, and 28% trying to avoid impulse buying. Almost 1 in 5 said that they will avoid fashion or fast fashion. The survey also highlights that consumers have become more demanding, said Mr. McFeely. Customer service, product availability and strong promotional value are key to winning the hearts and minds of Irish shoppers, he said. Retailers who understand the customer purchasing journey and allow the shopper to engage seamlessly across both online and in-store shopping channels will be the winners in 2024, he said. There we go. That's nice, as the fellow says. I'm going to do this next story, and because I want to play something after it, and then we'll have more stories before the break for the news. Adam Clayton says that U2 owe a huge debt to Ireland's show bands and dismissed any lingering snobbery about the era as ridiculous. Clayton, who has been a member of U2 for nearly 50 years, is presenting Ballroom Blitz. It's a new 2-part series for television in which he charts the rise and fall of hugely popular Irish acts such as the Clipper Carlton, Dickie Rock and the Miami Show Band, and many, many others. Speaking on RTE, or to RTE Entertainment, the musician said it was interesting to go back and look at the era. He said that he realised what an enormous legacy was there and what an enormous debt U2 and everybody that came after that and before had to that period. Right? Less than 10 years after Irish independence, he said these bands were travelling the length and breadth of the country and people were getting out and dancing. It was like social media of the day. This was how people met their partners, their wives, their husbands, he said. Ballroom Blitz is a bit of a personal journey for Clayton. The show band acts played an integral role in the development of an Irish music industry that today is a global success, something that was unimaginable when U2 began their own career. The series explores the phenomenon of the Irish show bands, which provided the mood music as Ireland went through huge social change and economic growth in the 1960s. It was an amazing time in Irish history, Clayton says. Car and tractor ownership was on the increase, so you could actually get from different parts of the country to these ballrooms, to these dances, and to meet people that you would never have met before. So it was a great time for social movement as much as anything else, and these bands were filled with great musicians. Indeed they were. We did mention Dickie Rock, didn't we? And the Miami and all those. Here's a track that anybody that knows anything about Dickie Rock will know and will be able to sing along to. It's called Candy Store.
Candy store on the corner to the chapel on the hill. Two young lovers are longing to go there, and they dream someday to the chapel on the hill.
There we go, Dickie Rock on Candy Store. Aye. Great old days, the show band days. They were over by the time I came along. But I do remember dancing to the likes of Joe Dolan when I was in my teens. And so they were still going. And but not in the numbers, not in the, the way that they were doing it in the late 1950s and through the 1960s into the early 1970s. But there you have it. Ballroom Blitz, looking forward to seeing that. That'll be an interesting one. A High Court hearing on legal costs for the civil case brought against Conor McGregor by Nikita Hand has been pushed back until next week. Ms. Hand won her civil action against the mixed martial arts fighter last week, with a jury finding that Mr. McGregor had raped her in a Dublin hotel in December of 2018. The jury found that she was not assaulted by James Lawrence, the second man she had sued for damages. Ms. Hand was awarded almost €250,000 in damages against Mr. McGregor. A hearing on the liability of legal costs was due to be heard tomorrow. This morning, Mr. Justice Alexander Owens agreed to delay the hearing by 1 week. The issue will now be heard next Thursday, the 5th of December. The Criminal Assets Bureau, or CAB as we know them as, has seized 23 cars, vans and trucks, as well as drugs, electronic equipment and over €400,000 in cash from a West Dublin organised crime gang. Over 130 Gardaí from national, specialist and local units searched 14 premises in the city today. Gardaí say that the gang that was the target of the operation is trafficking drugs in West Dublin and has links to Albanian organised crime. CAB has described it as a significant development in an ongoing proceeds of crime investigation. The cars, which include Range Rovers, Isuzu trucks and BMWs, were removed by articulated trucks this afternoon. Some good-looking cars as well they were, on the back of the old silver bullets, as we used to call them, the transporters. Cannabis, laptops, mobile phones and related documentation were also seized, and a number of bank accounts linked to the organised crime group have been frozen. CAB officers were supported by Gardaí from West Dublin, the Emergency Response Unit, the Armed Support Unit, the Stolen Motor Vehicle Investigation Unit and the Customs Dog Unit. Now, health workers represented by Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation, the INMO, by Forsa and by Unite have voted in favour of industrial action in a dispute over staff shortages. The unions have said that recruitment restrictions and the suppression of posts in the Health Service Executive, the HSE, are putting services under enormous strain and are putting patient safety at risk. Since last month, unions have been engaging in a series of lunchtime protests to highlight the issue. INMO Secretary General Phil Nehay said its Executive Council will consider the outcome of the ballot, where members voted 95.6% in favour, and will liaise with other health sector trade unions who have balloted their members to decide on a united approach. The Forsa ballot was returned by 93.6% in favour of industrial action and a turnout of 60.8%. The union's divisional executive will meet next week to discuss the result and to consider the next step. Unite said that an agreement with Health Service Management means that unions will be required to give 3 weeks' notice of industrial action, and HSE Management only has a short window to avert industrial action by rolling back the discredited pay and numbers strategy and instead negotiate a safe staffing framework in the interests of workers and patients, said Unite Regional Officer Owen Drummy. A lot more to come on that story, I would imagine. Let me just remind you that earlier today, George Lee and myself got together over a Zoom call and we recorded our G2 for this evening. It's longer than any G2 has been because there's a lot in there. The election obviously will be the first order of the day. I'm going to go straight to it after the news. I won't introduce it, but I will be chatting to you after it. Okay?
Talk Radio Europe.
Your voice in Spain.
Live on Eire, presented by Ger Sweeney.
George Lee, welcome to another G2. Always nice to have you on board. Of course, since you joined us last, you've turned another year on the calendar. Congratulations and belated happy birthday.
Thank you, Ger. The earth goes around the sun, you know.
It does indeed. I welcomed you to the G2, but maybe it could be an E2 because election 2024 will probably take up a lot of what we have to talk about because it's certainly taking up a lot of conversation on the street. But it's not so much about what's going on in the election campaign, George. It isn't. It's kind of like that. There is no campaign. Like there's been no fireworks really.
Damn squib, Ger. No, look, we still have 2 days to go. Well, today and tomorrow. I'm kind of waiting for something to happen still, you know. But it's just been a complete damn squib. I don't know, is it the time of the year? I think this suits the parties currently in government. Steady as she goes and all of that. But I really don't know where this is going to wind up. I do think that Fianna Fáil maybe have the upper hand at this point, and I know we'll get into that as it goes along. But nothing has happened that has shaken the trees and has made any significant difference, I would imagine, in terms of polls and in terms of steady as she goes. So, look, I really don't know this. And again, maybe it was because the American election was so hyped that people have got election fatigue at this point as well.
Maybe, yeah.
But it just really, it just hasn't taken off. It's actually a weird campaign.
It is, and as you say, it probably suits the government, the two major government parties, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. Like there have been a couple of attempts by the media to light a fuse on this. You know, we had the Michael O'Leary criticising teacher story. That died out after 3 days because nothing else was coming its way, and it just lost oxygen when Michael O'Leary went on the radio and said, yeah, that's right, yeah, that's what I said, and I'm standing over it, and they kind of blew it all away. Then we had the McGahan story, the councillor that, Simon Harris stood by. That didn't make any. And then, of course, in Contork last week, we had the lady who basically told Simon Harris that he had neglected, they, as in the government, had neglected carers in the last budget. He disputed that momentarily and then cleared off, and there was a lot of criticism. But that's dead in the water now as well, isn't it?
It's Ger. I think that is going to play a major role in the election itself.
Do you?
Because I think it speaks to the man. And you see, I think it also, and I know we're going to get into this, but I also think it coloured people's view of Simon Harris going into that debate last night. Because they were looking at him in a slightly different way than this happy-clappy Harris Hop new guy. They kind of looked at him and said, okay, so this guy had a go at somebody who was a carer, and if he'd had 2 weeks to recover from it, I don't think it would have an effect, but I think it did. And I also spoke to you, and we spoke on the G2 about this a long time ago, and it keeps coming back up, the waste, yes. The whole thing about waste, the bike shed, the children's hospital, the security hut, and a myriad of other bits and pieces that have come along the way. And again, I just think it's death by a 1,000 cuts. And for some Teflon reason, Micheál Martin has been able to avoid it, where Fine Gael hasn't. And I think that could be their undoing at the end of it. And when I say undoing, I think it could cost them the Taoiseachship. And I think that's where this is going to go.
It looks very much like it. Now, last week there was a television debate and there were 10 party leaders in inverted commas in it. Katie Hannon did well to control the 10 of them, but there was no shouting and roaring. There were no issues to debate. Last night, you had the three leaders, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil represented by Micheál Martin, Fine Gael represented by Simon Harris, and Sinn Féin represented by Mary Lou MacDonald. And you and I were texting during that particular debate, and I had made the point to you on a number of occasions that of the three of them, now I know that media this morning, they're saying, nobody won it, and if anyone won it, Micheál Martin won it by just a thread, and I still stand over that. He looked like our next Taoiseach, didn't he?
And I listened to a debate. I listened to an interview with Simon Harris towards the end of last week, before the whole thing blew up about the disabilities. And I thought in the back of my mind, this guy has the cut of a Taoiseach about him. He dealt with everything and everything. And then this issue happened, and then I watched it last night. And that's what I mean when I said earlier that I think it coloured me a small little bit.
Okay.
I'm watching him last night. I'm watching him up against Micheál Martin, who's a man, that I wouldn't have had fantastic time for, but I've actually grown into him.
Okay.
That's in the last few years. I mean, and it was brought up last night, but again, it didn't stick. He was in that government that brought down the country, and brought the IMF into the country and was Minister for Health. And I mean, he wasn't just a junior minister, he was a very senior minister at that time. But he seems to have been able to shake it off. And looking at him last night, if he could take away the use of, in terms of, vocabulary which drives me bananas, he uses it all of the time. If he could take that away, the guy had a kind of a sense of statesmanship about him. Elder statesman, older man, the other guy kind of...
The young pup.
Enthusiastic. Yeah, enthusiastic young pup, coming in...
Bouncing around the place,
I go back to a friend of mine who used to use the term mileage on the clock. Micheál Martin looked like a steady hand at the tiller with mileage on the clock. And I think that's what people saw last night. Poor Mary Lou, I think, was flapping around, couldn't get into specifics when she was asked to get into specifics. She did acquitted herself as best she possibly could, but I didn't see a Taoiseach there.
No. Going back to the Simon Harris thing, you tripped a memory for me of me sitting last weekend with my mother watching the news, and Simon Harris came on, and she looked at me and she goes, "He looks like a nice man, doesn't he?" And I didn't get into the whole Kinturk thing, it wasn't, I didn't want to confuse her. But he did have that image, and I wonder how many, I don't think it's going to change my mother's view of him, because I think she's of an age where she doesn't understand what's happening with it. But there will be a percentage, as you say, that will say, okay, I was going to do that, now I'm going to do this instead.
Okay, let's go back to the American election and just use what we know now. Going into that debate last night, you have the Fine Gael people who are dyed in the wool and who have made up their mind they're voting Fine Gael. You have the Fianna Fáil people who are dyed in the wool, Fianna Fáil people, and then you have the Sinn Féin people, and then you have the myriad of other, and their smaller parties or independents or whatever. But according to polls as we see it now, that only accounts for 69% of the people in the country.
1 in 3 or 2/3.
So there's 31, so there's the bones of a third of the people in the country still haven't made their mind up. So, take away whatever biases we might have ourselves towards anyone else. If you sat down there last night and knowing all of what you've known, I would say, about their policies and the bits and pieces you've heard on the radio, and you and I are probably more immersed in this than most people in the country, let's face it.
Probably.
But if you were looking at that and you were seeing it last night, what way would you have been swayed if you were looking at those three without having any bias in your head? And I think if I was looking at that, I'd say, nice young lad, like very mannerly, I'm awfully sorry for interrupting you, sort of thing. And in fairness, on top of his agenda and on top of all of those things, when he got a chance. But when Micheál Martin opened his mouth last night, you kind of got the sense that he had a steady hand. And I don't know, and as you know, Ger, I wouldn't hold any
affiliations.
Particularly for either of them, I suppose, really, but particularly towards Micheál Martin, given the past. So I was trying to look at it with an unbiased view, knowing that we were going to be talking about it this morning. But God love her, I didn't think Mary Lou came across very well.
Did you not? Okay. What really kind of summed it up for me was listening earlier on this morning to Pat Kenny, and people who know Irish broadcasters will know that Pat Kenny would have his finger pretty much on the pulse. But when I heard him talking about the fact that Mary Lou MacDonald was wearing the same colour as Miriam O'Callaghan was wearing, I thought to myself, there really isn't a whole lot to talk about here when you have that kind of conversation.
And he went to that comment, I'd say, about 7 minutes into the interview with the political correspondent of The Independent and of News Talk. So it meant that there was absolutely nothing else to talk about.
George,
I actually heard the start of that interview earlier,
Is this because we don't have quality politicians anymore? Are they all the same? Is that why it is the way it is?
I don't think so, Ger. I actually do think that and I was looking at it last night, and I said the level of discourse that was going on there last night, to be fair, was much better than the level of discourse that I saw in the States between the presidential candidates, if you take it to that level. We have people that are on top, in fairness, of their agendas. They mightn't agree on everything, and they all have different ways of approaching it. But they are clued into what the issues are. Now, look, to use the American analogy, I suppose is a bit unfair because we don't have that massive foreign policy side of things that they would have here. I think there's 17 companies in America that are bigger financial entities than the Irish state. So what we actually have, we can't get above ourselves here. What we have is a very small, open economy. If America gets a sniffle, we get pneumonia. And so we just have to be very careful about putting all of this stuff into perspective from an Irish point of view. We have a certain amount of buffer now because we're part of the European Union, and that gives us access to markets, and it also gives us protections that we wouldn't have if we were just a small, 4.5 million or 6 million or whatever we are on the periphery of Europe. So look, we have that. We have all of that. We're also blessed at the moment that we do have money in the bank to a certain extent as a country. And in a lot of respects, it's how are we going to spend that money has become most of the discourse and debate that has been going on currently. And look, it's a lovely position to be in. I've gone into elections before looking at this, and God love us, it was who can cut the most was what they were looking at. But we don't know what's coming down the tracks. We don't know what's coming from America. We don't know, what the outcome of the wars in Europe are going to be. The war, the Middle Eastern thing. We don't know what way that's working out. And delighted to see a ceasefire this morning on one side of it. So we're in turbulent international times. And we're in a little bit of a kind of a pocket, a very unusual pocket for Ireland in that we seem to have a lot of money. But we also have a lot of problems. I mean, we have a climate issue in the country going on. We have, the farmers issue is there. We have a migration issue, in the country. We have a housing problem that's, and this has come out so much in the election campaign. You could have predicted all of these things before you went into the campaign. And I think when we say that it didn't take off, we were also kind of saying, "Yes, I wonder what the red herring is going to be in this," because there's always been one. But there has been none. So what we've been left to do is to constantly regurgitate all of the issues that we knew were going to come up, and the way in which the big parties, have worked this is that they've released a different topic every day or every couple of days.
That's right. Yeah.
But they didn't do it in conjunction with each other. So you have a constantly recurring theme of housing, you have a constantly recurring theme of homelessness, you have a constantly recurring theme of nitrates directives, all of those sort of things. And then they're playing to the different sides, the urban people, the rural people, the farmers, the professional middle classes, the working classes, the people on disability allowance. Now, I do think if there was one thing that wasn't as stridently plain to see before we came into this that has become centre of most things, it's disabilities and disability issues, and particularly around carers. And I think that has become very important in this election campaign. And it is something that whatever government goes in, I think it's something that will be dealt with very quickly when they go back.
Okay. What about independents, George? There is a lot of talk that independents are going to play a very big role in the formation of the new government. Do you agree?
It depends on the arithmetic, Ger, and there isn't a vote cast yet.
No.
I think there will be a lot of independents, but I don't know if they will have any power, and that's my sense of it, because I think the way it's shaping up now, much and all, as Ivana Bacik, the leader of the Labour Party, has said, I think we're heading towards Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour.
Yeah.
Now, she is saying that she won't go in without having maybe the Soc Dems with her as well. But I think, look, when push comes to shove, if she has enough seats, she'll go in.
But the Soc Dems don't seem interested in joining forces with Labour. I think they're trying to put distance between the two of them, aren't they?
Well, they are, because it's a bit like Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael at this stage.
Okay.
What they're trying to do is, they're trying to establish the fact that they're an independent party. I mean, people look at Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael now and say, sure, to use Mary Lou's term last night, Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and it's a little bit the same with the Labour Party and the Continuity Labour Party, which is what the Soc Dems are, so look. I think that's the way it's going to go, and if that's the way it's going to go, if the arithmetic falls that way, well then sure, there's no point having 20 independents in the Dáil, is there, at that point? So look, I really don't know, Ger. I would imagine that's the way it's going to fall. Now, it could fall differently, and you could wind up maybe relying on 3 or 4 of those independents, the likes of a Michael Lowry, who would have a leaning towards Fine Gael, from the gene pool, as they call it, maybe the Healy Rays or whatever as well, that would have a leaning towards Fianna Fáil. So look, I think there's enough of those kind of gene pool leanings that if it gets close, that they could bring a couple of those in.
Okay.
Independent Ireland, I don't know. I heard Richard O'Neill.
I did too, yeah.
The radio this morning, and he didn't do it for me.
I thought Richard was brilliant when he said, "And where's the railway? Where's the light rail in Donegal?" Your man was completely lost. Anyway, listen. Before we leave the election where it is, because we've only just under we've all of tomorrow to go with the canvassing and the whole lot. The moratorium is gone, so after 2:00 tomorrow, we'll still be able to hear things about the election, I would imagine.
And watch social media at that point. I think watch social media after 2:00 tomorrow, or when there's no longer a way of parties being able to respond, because I just have a sense that somebody somewhere is going to drop a bomb.
Okay. Do you know how you're going to vote? And
I have an idea.
Sorry,
I have an idea.
Okay, I was going to put a second part on that. And if you did, is there anything could happen that could change your mind?
The assassination of the candidates.
Right? Is that a verbal contract?
Look, I have seen nothing, Ger, in this election campaign that has shaken me from my original feelings before the thing broke out. And I think that's probably that's probably the country's view as well. It's kind of an as you were, but I think Fine Gael are going to lose out. And again, I made this point to you before. Fine Gael are going to lose out because they have such a churn this time round.
36.
They've lost over half of their parliamentary party, and they've new people coming in. So I think if they'd managed to hold it for one more election, holding on to the majority of their party, I think that they could possibly have got it over the line as the biggest party. But I think that's going to ultimately what will determine Fine Gael's fate, and will render Simon Harris as the Taoiseach rather than the Taoiseach for the next 5 years.
All right.
By the way, Ger, before we go off this, I think it's nice to remember as well that the death was announced yesterday.
Of course.
Of Gemma Hussey. And Gemma Hussey was a politician that I had great time for. She was a woman who represented, I suppose, women and women's rights. I would put her up there, certainly with our other friend that died in the last few weeks as well, in Mary
Benotti. Mary O'Rourke.
Mary O'Rourke, and also I suppose the other lady that came to my mind last night when I was watching this was the late great Marion Finucane, who would have been to that forefront as well. And we've lost some very powerful women this year. We've also lost Nell McCafferty.
That's right.
This year we've lost Gemma Hussey, we've lost Mary O'Rourke, and they were women who were change makers in Ireland, and I think it's just important that we remember her this morning.
Indeed. All right, listen, I'm going to move away from the election, and I would imagine we'll be back to it next week. If so, pencil it into your diary, please, if you would, and we'll try and get Ben on board as well. I know we were hoping, but sure, listen, trying to get a chat with Ben now at the minute is next to impossible. We also lost a Limerick man like ourselves, Johnny Doohan. I didn't do anything on the programme 2 weeks ago after the death had been announced. Johnny died in a swimming incident in Silverstrand, just beyond Salt Hill in County Galway. He lived in County Galway for a number of years on the 12th of November. And I suppose it was with great sadness that his death was announced and met by people, wasn't it?
I was actually amazed at the outpouring, Jared, in some respects. Because I suppose, look, Johnny is most famous, and I'm sure he had a pain in his jaw from people saying this to him. Most famous for The Voyage, of course, the great song The Voyage. But Johnny was he was such a talented songwriter. And I made the connection, and I know you're going to play a song that's representative of this in a little while. I made the connection when I was talking to some people over the last couple of weeks. He came from exactly the same spot as Frank McCourt in Limerick.
Did he?
In Wolfstone Street and Barrackhill and all that area. And the two of them looked at life, maybe 15, 20 years apart in that part of Limerick, but they looked on life completely differently. Johnny always looked back on his time in Wolfstone Street with a great level of emotion, with a great level of hankering back to those times. I suppose a little bit like myself in the part of Limerick that I came from, always with a view to the great memories that he had of those. And I know I've read his biography. I read Johnny's biography a number of years ago, which was excellent. And I've also interviewed him actually a couple of times, as you have, I know. And
I haven't.
Had you not?
I've never met Johnny. I never met him.
Yeah.
In all the years I've been working.
I'll tell you a lovely Johnny story. Is that I was doing a programme on Clare FM many years ago. I think I told you this. And I was on one Saturday night. And you know yourself, when you get into the cocoon in a studio and you're playing music and you're talking into the microphone.
In the good old days when you were allowed to pick your own music.
but you're in this cocoon, and you know what? While you're kind of aware that you're on the radio, you're not really aware that you're on the radio.
That's right, which is lovely.
You're enjoying it for yourself, and then occasionally the phone will ring, or something will happen, and you interact. I suppose it's all texts and emails now, or whatever, or WhatsApps. But I played, I think, the song that you're going to play in a few minutes, and it's not one of the usual ones. It's not one of the ones that's trotted out regularly like The Voyage or whatever. And I remember I was gushing in my praise of the song and the lyricism of it. And when you do play it, I'd encourage people just to listen to the words and the pen pictures that are created in this, because it's poetry as far as I'm concerned. And I went into the next track and the phone rang, and you know the way you pick up the phone in the studio, and you don't know, could be Mary from Ballyale,
or Ballyala. Good. I wish it was.
There was a voice on the other end of the phone which sounded vaguely familiar. The best way of describing it, of Johnny's voice, is it's almost kind of Tom Waits. There's a kind of gravel in it. And he said, is this Clare FM? And I said, yes. And is this the fella that's on the radio now? And I said, yeah. And he said, this is Johnny Doohan here. You just played one of my songs. And he said, who have I? And I told him where I was from. And he said, God, he said, you gave me a great spin there. He said, I thank you for what you said about it. He said, because that meant an awful lot. And we got talking about various things about Limerick and various things. And in the course of it, he said to me, how did you find the song? Well, I said, there's a CD in the studio here. I said, I put it on. I said, particularly like that one. And he said, do you not have a copy of it yourself? And I said, no. I said, look, I've gone looking for it even in secondhand, CD players or whatever. And he says, leave that with me. And within 2 days, I had a copy of the CD sent to me by Johnny.
Isn't that lovely?
And I just thought, look, I was a nobody, Ger. I was playing a bit of music on the radio on Clare. He happened to pick it up. But I know now listening, and I was listening to Shay Byrne the morning after he died. Apparently, Shay Byrne told an almost identical story on Radio 1.
Really?
That he played a Johnny Doohan one morning, and he got an email straight away from Johnny thanking him for playing the song.
Brilliant.
So obviously this was something that Johnny did, you know. But he was such a star, Ger, and I don't think he ever realised how big he was in some respects. The other thing that struck me greatly, and he's a former colleague of you and I in Clare FM as well, the Western correspondent for RTE now is Pat McGrath.
Yes.
And he's the guy that does the thing. And the night that it was announced that 2 people had been drowned at Silver Strand, the names hadn't been announced at that point. But I remember looking at Pat doing a report from Silver Strand.
He announced it actually, didn't he?
He did it on the 9, but on the 6 news, he was there. And I remember looking at him and saying, he's very shaken by this. You know, there's something more about this. And as you and I both know, I mean, Pat would be a very good friend of your great friend PJ Curtis as well through Clare FM, and I know that PJ would have been a friend of Johnny's as well. So you know, Pat and PJ and Johnny would probably have been known to each other. And it struck me that night. You know, it was only afterwards when I thought back on it, I said, yeah, he knew at that point who was missing, and you know, and who had been taken out.
I suppose it's also worth remembering that the second person was only found, the remains found 3 or 4 days ago. So that's nice for her family and they were completely separate incidents.
By the way, it was Maureen Eire, just to put a name on the lady, because I think it's important that we remember her in that way.
All right, we remember Johnny as we will always remember him as a nice fella, but also a great singer, a great songwriter. Let's take a track, and this is called Just Another Town.
Ultimately a Limerick man, by the way, Ger. That's what this song is about.
Here it is.
The old spinster is going insane. Her next door neighbor is in church again. 2 drunks are fighting down in the lane, and little children are playing the game. Dogs are barking, little girls sing, and the chapel bell begins to ring. Someone deals Bobby a king, and the pavement money starts to ring. And the street is drifting into evening while the sun is going down. I'm just back there capturing the feeling, though it's just another town. Just another town. The cripple crawls up the avenue, and someone else says, how do you do? Someone kicks a ball over to you, while the sky begins to lose its hue. And a group of old stevedores from the ships come up the street, bent from the hips. One takes a cigarette from his lips, someone else drops the coin he flips. And the street is drifting into evening while the sun is going down. I'm just back there capturing the feeling, though it's just another town. Just another town. play and I can hear it still. The slide trombone is softly blown. Your nurse is on her way to the shops. The epileptic suddenly drops. Down the hill my father's in the docks. In the bar the drinking never stops. Bobby throws down a pair of queens. The church bell interrupts someone's dream. Someone's talking a football team. Some girl is straightening her nylon seam. And the street is drifting into evening while the sun is going down. I'm just back there capturing the feeling, though it's just another town. Just another town.
As you said, George, take a listen to the words in that one. The late Johnny Doohan, and it's awful to be saying the late Johnny Doohan, and just another town. Nice one. Let's move away from that. Let's move to something that's quite extraordinary, I thought. It was announced about 10 days ago that An Garda Síochána were going to put 99 pictures on their website of people that they believed were involved in some way, not necessarily all illegally, but they were involved some way in Dublin during the riots of this time last year, and they wanted to identify them. And as of this morning, 90 of the 99 pictures published have been identified in the space of a week or 10 days. The remaining 9 pictures have now been taken down, so there's no more left on the Garda website. But wasn't it a very unusual step to take?
It was, and it's the first time the Guards have ever done anything like this, I believe. And I'm sure that they had to go through all sorts of attorney generals and everything else to figure out whether they were allowed to do this under a GDPR. But I think it's been an outstanding success. They've identified 90 out of the 99, and so successful now that they're in a position where they're able to take down the pictures off the website this morning, I believe. So that's a positive step from them. But I suppose there's another side to this, Ger, which is that here we are, it's over a year now. It was the 23rd of November last year were the riots. So, we're over a year at this stage. The main protagonist of this was only prosecuted last week, was only convicted last week.
That's right.
It has taken that length of time. It is only in the last 2 weeks that the Guards have put up the pictures of 99 people that they're looking for in relation to this. And I'm not being critical of the Guards here at all. I'm being critical of the criminal justice system. I suppose that that doesn't allow us to be able to prosecute this. And this point was made on the debate last night, just before I fell asleep as I went into the last section. Where to be fair to Keir Starmer, and look, Keir Starmer, I suppose, in the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer has a background in criminal justice, so he probably knew the levers to pull and didn't need to be going to attorney generals and stuff. But as soon as the riots happened in England, within 2 weeks there was guys behind bars. Yeah. And I think, we need to look at this. We need to understand this. No, I think the Guards are heading the right way. The body cams are certainly something that is very positive. And I've spoken to a couple of Guards on the beat in the last couple of weeks. I've been asking them about the body cams and what they thought of them. And they said they were very I suppose, what would I say, reticent about them when they were introduced first. And now they see them actually as a fantastic tool, because no longer is it just the idiot with the mobile phone who's videoing everything. It's the guard themselves that has a record of it. And not only that, they said actually the body cams diffuse an awful lot of things.
Do they?
Because when they announce to a potential suspect, I am now about to turn on my body cam, number one, it immediately says to the person, okay, this is getting serious. and number two, they realise that no matter what they do, there's evidence there.
There's evidence.
So I think that has helped. And I think maybe if the guards had now, the other point in this, Ger, is that, and I know there is CCTV in the city centre in Dublin, but most of the CCTV images that were captured and put up on the Garda website were got from private cameras. And this is a bit of a bugbear of mine, because look, I'm involved in a situation where there are public cameras, and guards come occasionally and they'd ask around footage and things like that. And but I'm still paying 23% VAT on CCTV cameras. I'm still paying VAT on the repair of those cameras. I'm constantly listening to the guards whenever there's a car accident, asking for dash cam footage. You know what? I pay for the dash cam if I have it in my car. I pay for the SD card that goes into it. I'm paying 23% VAT on the dash cam in the car. And I think, look, if these things are of such great use, we really should be looking at incentivizing people in some way to engage with it. And look, most good-minded people in this country, and in any country, in fairness, will engage with the police force. And if there's a crime, will want to help solve it. Now, they mightn't want their name attached to it, but they'll go ahead with it. So, I think that we're missing a beat here. The criminal justice system, takes so long. Look, without going into too much detail, I mean, the DPP turned down the Conor McGregor case, and it had to go through a civil action for the lady to get justice. And you wonder how many other cases are there. I also realise that there is different bars,
different elements of proof and all that.
It has to be beyond a reasonable doubt, obviously, for a criminal conviction. It's a balance of probability for a civil conviction. But I think there's a level of disquiet around law and order in the country. I think the city centres particularly are coming under, and I'm not just talking about Dublin, I'm certainly talking about my own city here in Limerick. The city centres are coming under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of antisocial behaviour. I also think that, Ger, we actually have a countrywide problem with drugs and our view to drugs. And I'm kind of smiling in some respects when I hear about the debate in the election at the moment around the legalisation of cannabis. Because you can walk down O'Connell Street in Limerick or O'Connell Street in any town any Saturday night, and the bang of weed passing every pub and every smoking area is there. And it's a bit like I was in New York a couple of years ago, and it was the one thing that struck me about New York. Every street corner,
really,
just disgusting. And it is illegal, Ger,
It's one of those illegal things that a blind eye is turned to. Yeah.
And I suppose, look, that's just cannabis, and people will say what they want about cannabis and that. But it's not just cannabis. I mean, we're talking about diazepam, we're talking about, cocaine. There was a massive cocaine bust in Limerick in the last couple of days, where over 500,000 euros worth of cocaine was captured. Ger, that wouldn't be captured unless there was a mark.
That's it.
And if that's what was captured, what's getting through? I mean, is that 10% of it? Is that 90% of it? I'm inclined to think that it's on the lower end.
Let's leave law and order and more sad news brought to us not last weekend, but the weekend before, 16th of November. A man that would have been well known to both you and I, John Kenny from Dunbelievables. But John was a comedian, he was an author, he was a poet, he was an actor, a writer in his own right for many, many years. And his death was met again with huge sadness. And I remember I got a text message about it, sent it to you and said, I haven't been able to confirm this, but this. And I was delighted the following morning when it wasn't on the news. And I thought, lovely, it's just a rumour. But unfortunately, by 11 or 12 o'clock that day, the rumour had been confirmed. And a tough one, John Kenny, gone at the age of 66.
Sure, he was, you know, I mean, they were groundbreaking.
When you say they now, you're talking about Pat Short himself,
Pat Short himself were groundbreaking. But John was a talent ever before the Unbelievables.
He was.
You know, there was a couple of people that, you know, when we were younger, who you'd go to see in pubs around Limerick. John Kenny was one of them, and the O'Malleys were probably the other. If you remember, they were stone mad.
That's right, they were, yeah.
But Kenny always had that edge. You know, there was always a kind, and his ability. And look, I think maybe Pat Short as well, and it was probably fortuitous the two of them found each other to an extent. But his ability to capture the ordinary and turn it into something that was comic.
Yes.
Because we could see in his work always, number one, he had a great sense of fun. And I know the song that you're going to play from him shows that sense of fun. But he had this magnificent way of taking the ordinary and making it extraordinary and making it very funny, accentuating the characters that we all meet. You know, I told you a story, and this is a small little bit blue, so we'll go with it anyway.
Okay.
I was in a queue for a post office, and it's real Limerick. This is just as much Limerick as you could possibly get. The first thing is that I went and there was a queue outside the door. There was two people talking outside the door, and I presumed that the two people were just talking outside the door. So I went to go in, and I got this, love.
There's a queue.
There's a queue, love.
Right.
So anyway, I, you know, passed my apologies and got into the queue behind the two. And then, of course, I became their best friend. Mm-hmm. There was a man and a woman there. And we started talking about this and that and the election, I think. And the next thing she says, geez, she says, you know, the weather. She says, the weather. She said, it's very strange. She says, and at the time, you know, we'd had a very fine spell and the temperatures were up.
Okay.
She says, I'm sweating all day. She says, I'm sweating walking down here to get my labour. And she was an older lady now. She was in her 70s. So we said, yeah. And I said, and then I said, you know, the old summer wasn't great. Like, you know, I know. She says, it was awful. She says, I didn't take the tights off me all summer.
Oh, at which point you took 2 steps backwards.
and it's the reason I tell that story is that I could just imagine John Kenny being in that queue, seeing that and turning that into a sketch. You know, that he was able to see the ordinary in things and turn it into something that was comic and take that 3 or 4 steps down the line, still to be something that's recognisable that each one of us can see. And it's that Limerick. It's just, that's why I love Limerick, I suppose, to a certain extent. It's just the people. It's the self-deprecating humour. It's, you know, we love to have a hero, but don't get above yourself, love.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you get a slap very quickly, you know, if you're above your station in any shape or form.
I think he is. You know, I knew his father and his grandfather, and none of them were good word to say about any of them.
John Kenny, he was brilliant. And of course, when you were saying about, you know, going to see John Kenny live when the Unbelievables were in the height of their stardom and what they were doing, you were terrified if you were in the audience because there was no hiding place. You'd say, I'll go halfway down the hall, I'll go into the middle seat, you know, there'd be 30 or 40 seats, and you go into the middle one, you could still be called out, and you know you can't refuse because he comes in and he drags you out, and you could end up on the stage very quickly. You know,
the famous one. You and I both know James Sexton.
Yeah.
James is a very successful event management company now, but the video that's done of the concert hall with him in it, where he walks down. I think it was Kenny. Was it Kenny or anyway? But he walks down and he's walking past James, and he knows James so well. I mean, these guys have worked together, you know. And James thinks he's escaped, and he's gone 2 steps beyond him, and he comes back. Lift up your shoe.
Lift up your shoe.
Did you step in something? And this starts 10 minutes of just absolutely wrecking the guy.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Come up here. And it's the schoolmaster then, and the 2 boys go at it. And just fantastic. There's also, and if anyone gets a chance to see it, it's one of the best pieces, and John Kenny is front and centre in this. It's the swimming section. I don't know if you ever remember the swimming. They did, and it was almost like a play,
right?
Where John Kenny made out that he was going to swim. They used the front of the stage in the concert hall, and he was jumping into the ocean, and Short was behind him playing the saxophone. And creatively, it's just one of the best pieces. It was the facial expressions, it was the body language, it was all of those things. But he was able to do all of that and turn it into an art form. And actually, Pat Short started out as the saxophonist for John Kenny's show.
That's right.
And obviously the two of them then realised the talent that each other had. So yeah, God rest his soul. A lovely, gentle guy who could turn up anywhere, you know. Are
there younger people coming behind to replace the likes of these geniuses?
Well, we would have said that as well, Ger, when you had the Tom and Pascals of this world, and you
suppose, yeah.
Rare talents are rare, you know, by definition. I don't really like the direction comedy is going now, because a lot of it is very blue.
Yes, it is. And a lot of it is just standing up and saying, this is what I believe in, and making funny jokes, or not even funny jokes, but they're making statements. That's what they're doing. Yeah. You know, it's not comedy to make you laugh.
And I suppose the beauty, and I mentioned Tom and Pascal there as well, there's great similarities between what Tom and Pascal did. And Tom and Pascal were of their era. They were 60s and 70s. And they were Limerick as well, and as Limerick as you get. But there's great similarities between them and the Unbelievables, because they captured the people of Limerick, particularly, or the people of Ireland, at their very best. You know, there were 2 ladies like over the pram and the cashinoni, and they were talking about the ham from Shaw's and things that people could relate to. And the Unbelievables did the same. You know, you could see the people. And there's people, particularly from Killiscully and those areas in around Newport, and they would actually be able to tell me who the boys were, who the boys were basing their characters on, because these were lads that used to hang around. Yeah. And some of that even transferred then, I think, into the Father Ted's, but certainly into the Killiscully, which was a TV programme in Ireland. And actually Pascal featured in one of the Killiscullys.
He did, Pascal O'Grady, he did.
At one point as well, and of course, and we wish Pascal and Mary all the best, because Pascal is still hale and hearty, and
he's well into his 90s now, isn't he?
Well into his 90s, but a fantastic character and a great man.
All right, John Kenny, Eire go raibh on him, and the same for Johnny Doohan. Listen, we played a track from Johnny Doohan. Would we take? I was going to play something madcap from John, and then I remembered, no, let's play, because he was a great singer as well. And he turned, I suppose, one of the traditional Irish songs, Spancel Hill, which was a poem originally, or a letter, into something very different. And it, as you said earlier, it kind of shows just how mad he was, in a great sense, and also how creative, how creative he was.
Before you play this, will you tell your listeners your great story about this? Because there's a lovely story attached to this.
Back in 1989, when Clare FM was starting, I was asked to present the very first programme. So, as with all things great, a lot of debate went into what song would we start with, because it had to have meaning. And everybody was throwing suggestions out and all sorts. And then I said, lads, I know this sounds daft, but I have a great record. And it was a record, it still is. I said, I have a great record by John Kenny. Now, I said, I know he's not a Clare man. I know that. But I said, it's a Clare song. But I said, he does something with it that I think will set the agenda for this radio station, because we want to be a wholesome and we want to be a Clare-based Clare radio station. But we also want to have fun. And I said, I think this will suffice. So Cayman Jones, our chief executive at the time, said, give me a listen to it. Of course, Cayman wouldn't have heard it. So I think following day, I had it at home. I brought it in and I played it. And once he heard it, he said, yep, that's it. And that was the first song that we played on Clare FM, the first official song that we played on that fateful day just after midday. So, yeah, lovely story. Right, will we go and do it?
Do that.
All right. George Lee, as always, thank you. It's an extended one today, and my apologies for tying you up for so long. But I do appreciate it, and we might be back next week. What's that?
These cable ties are killing me.
Yeah, but you'll love it. You're smiling. Go on away, and hopefully we'll chat to you again next week when the election is all over and done with. And we'll leave you with John Kenny and Spancel Hill. Thanks, George.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, lads, spread yourselves out there now. 4 beats straight to the block, and away we go. Yoo-hoo!
Ja, ze move over, man. You know, give it space.
Oh, last night as I lay dreaming of pleasant days gone by, man. Oh, no, brain was bent on rambling. To island I did fly, man. Well, I stepped on board the vision, and I followed with the wind, man. Till it last I came to anchor at the cross of Spancel Hill, man. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I went to see my neighbors just to see what they might say, man. Oh, the old ones were out talking, and the young ones turning grey, man. Well, I met the dealer quickly. He's as bold as ever still, man. Well, he used to sell me ponies when I lived in the Spancel Hill, man. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Yoo-hoo! Steady on that way, straight on. All right, yes, give it, yeah. I paid to fly in visit to my first and only love, man. She's as fair as any Rasta. She's as gentle as the dumb man. When she threw the leg around me, she said,
Johnny, I love you still.
oh, she was the dealer's daughter. She was a spiritual pill man. Oh, yeah, yeah. 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 Well, I slept, I held and kissed her, and singing dance of yore. She said, Johnny, oh, Johnny, oh, Johnny, you've been smoking late, many's the time before, man. Well, the coffee crew in the morning, but the crew was loud and shrill. But I woke in old Jamaica, 600 chairs from the Spancel Hill, man. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
we go. A rather unusual twist on a great song from John Kenny, late John Kenny, and that is his version of Spancel Hill. Absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much to George. As I said to you before the news at the top of the hour, the last hour, it was an extended G2 this week because there was so much to do on the election. And I wanted to give fair time as well to both Johnny Doohan and to John Kenny and kind of do them proud, if you know what I mean. So thank you to George for sparing almost an hour this morning to chat to me. International protection applicants who were temporarily housed in City West last week are to be allowed to stay there during the current cold weather. That's according to the Department of Integration this evening. The announcement comes after dozens of new applicants received emails yesterday telling them that as the cold weather period had passed, they had to leave the facility by 10 o'clock this morning. The Irish Refugee Council had expressed concern about the move, describing it as inappropriate and misguided, given that temperatures remain quite low. However, that decision now appears to have been reversed. A spokesperson for the department said this afternoon that during the weather warning period last week, new applicants were temporarily accommodated at City West and will remain there during the current cold temperatures. The spokesperson said that their teams continue to manage a very limited supply of accommodation and are prioritising people with families or who are identified as vulnerable and on assessment. We are keeping the situation closely reviewed and responding to guidance on any further weather warnings, they say. Additionally, residents at the Crooksland IPAS Centre are to remain at indoor accommodation on the site as well. Residents from River Lodge will remain at the former Central Mental Hospital site in Dundrum. That's good to know that people will not be out on the streets in tents in this very cold weather. That's it. Done and dusted for another week. I hope that you have enjoyed the programme as much as I enjoyed putting it together and presenting it for you. Thank you to Patricia for her story on the first Irish Nobel Prize winner, Yeats, W.B. Yeats, and to George for the G2. As always, can I say thank you very much to Antonio Sierra, the programme's Spanish-Irish cultural advisor. Thanks a million, Antonio, for the work that you continue to do for the programme and on behalf of the programme. So thank you very much indeed for that. And thank you for listening. I'll be back with you, all being well, next Wednesday between 7 and 9 for another edition of Live on Eire. So in the meantime, look after yourselves and stay here on Talk Radio Europe.
Ger Sweeney presents Live on Eire in association with emeraldconnection.net.
You've been listening to a TRE production. If you've enjoyed this programme, there'll be another episode waiting for you next week, right here on this platform, where you can also access our extensive back catalogue of shows and interviews. For more information on our live programming, social media channels and apps, and how to contact Talk Radio Europe, please visit TRE.radio.